everyone. My name is Emily Singer Lucio, and I'm the ADA coordinator for the University of Maryland.
And I'm Karlena Walker. I am a resident director on campus.
Great, thanks, Karlena. Welcome. We're happy to have you here today. I want to talk with you a little bit about you and your life on campus with a disability. So let's get started. Can you start by sharing with me or everyone a little bit about yourself and your disability?
Sure. So I am living with limb-girdle muscular dystrophy. It is I would say, fairly uncommon disability in that it doesn't affect a lot of people. Um, and there are a lot of subtypes. So there's, I think, up to 30 right now that they're still discovering. And I was actually diagnosed a little bit after I turned 30. So I spent a lot of time figuring out what's wrong with my body. This isn't normal, or this isn't the normal I'm used to. So I was able to go through a litany of testing and all of that to get my diagnosis. And now I'm just kind of living life, taking every day how it comes.
That's great. Well, good for you. Tell me a little bit about what it was like to learn you had a disability, especially since it came later in life. That must have been challenging.
Yeah, it was I would say it was frustrating to try to figure out what was wrong. I knew something was wrong. I couldn't run, I couldn't get upstairs as easily. And I was told everything from your muscles are overextended to like, well, we don't see anything wrong. Maybe it's just you. Maybe you need to exercise more. And it took lots of MRIs and x rays and finally a biopsy that confirmed it. So it was a relief once they did figure out what was going on. But then I would say it was really difficult to figure out, okay, now what? What does this actually mean? At the time, my daughter was like kindergarten or first grade. So for me, it was very much like, well, what does this mean for how I parent, what I'm able to do, what I'm not able to do?
Yeah,
And then all of the things of, I've pictured my life in a certain way, and this very much is going to shift everything I've ever imagined.
that's hard.
Yeah,
That's really hard.
yeah.
How was it for your daughter?
Um, I think it was pretty good. I mean, she's very much seen the progression, and so I've talked to her at every interval of, okay, this is why I'm using a cane now. This is why I'm moving into a scooter and then to a wheelchair. And so I think because she's been able to see the shift in my mobility, it's been kind of, I don't know that it's easier, but I think she understands it, and she's almost 18 now, so she's lived most of her life with me having a very apparent mobility impairment. But she has questions. She asks. She also does a lot of research, so I have to have
Okay.
lots of conversations about. Please do not WebMD me. I don't know what it's going to tell you, but I think this generation is very much about getting information, so she's really good about that.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure that it's been, since it was progressive, right? It's been different at different stages. Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about how that's been at sort of the different stages?
Well, I would say honestly, a big part of it that impacts that was my idea of myself as a disabled person. It took a really long time for me to accept that I don't just have this condition. I am disabled, and I'm going to look very different over time. So, I would say at every stage, unfortunately, it took me much longer to transition to different mobility aids initiatives. So, I didn't start using a cane until maybe a year and a half after my diagnosis. I probably should have started a year earlier, but it was a game changer. I was like, oh, this is really incredibly helpful. I think it was just me accepting how much more visible this would make my impairments to people. And then I moved into a scooter a little bit after 2020, and that was life changing. Definitely out and about more. And then I've been in my wheelchair now for a little over a year, and this has been my favorite. I'm always out and about. I think for me, it's been really helpful to understand that at every stage when my mobility is decreasing, I have access to different aids that honestly increase my independence.
I was going to say, I think a lot of people look at individuals who have mobility devices, whatever, whether it's a cane, a walker, a scooter, a wheelchair, power, manual, whatever. I think people without disabilities look at that as a limitation.
Yes,
And it's so eye opening to hear you say it has been a life changer, a game changer, right?
absolutely.
It's opened so many more opportunities for you at every stage of the game
Yeah,
because of these mobility devices that we have to make it so you can be more independent.
absolutely. And I wish someone had told me that sooner. Like it took honestly getting to my scooter where I really understood when people said, like, yes, it looks, we perceive it as giving up freedom. We perceive it as giving up independence because, like, oh, you're giving up on maintaining the ability to walk. Well, it's not really about maintaining that. That's not an option. So being able to use these different tools has, enabled me to get more involved on campus, to get around campus, frankly. But just being able to kind of go out and about and do things by myself without necessarily needing someone with me, worrying about the risk of a fall and all of that. So, yeah, definitely life changing, definitely a way to give me more independence than I would have had otherwise.
That's great. What have you found helpful to share with people about yourself with others?
That's difficult. I think one that I tell people is every day is different. There are lots of things that could impact my mobility on a given day, and so sometimes I will wake up and figure out how are we doing today. And so that can be a little frustrating if, there are things that I want to do or plans that I might have and kind of have to come back and say, this is not going to work today, or this is going to have to look a little bit different. I'm grateful to have really good friends and family who are probably, I think, more observant of that than I am at times. And so they are, I would say, more encouraging of like, don't push yourself. You don't have to do that than I am at times. So yeah.
You're a go-getter.
Yeah, I'm fiercely independent,
yeah.
almost to a fault. And so one of the things that having a disability has really made me lean into community a lot more, be a lot more honest about my limitations because I can push myself, but at what cost? And so sometimes the cost on the back end isn't worth it. So, I'm very much in a stage of not fighting my body. That doesn't help anyone. But really learning, okay, well, where am I right now? And what are my capacities? And being honest with people and just saying it's going to look different from day to day. It's funny when people ask me, well, how can we help you? What do you need? I don't necessarily know until I try, which is, I think, difficult because people are like, well, you always have this impairment. Why don't you always know what you need? And, some days that heavier thing I can lift, and some days my body's like, no, we're not doing that. So
yeah. I know somebody who had a spinal cord injury in high school, and it could be so easy for someone in that situation to just stop doing things,
right?
And that person's parents, when they were sitting down at the dinner table one time after they had gotten out of the hospital and gone through initial stages of therapy and all that, put a fork in front of them and said, "You're gonna have to figure out how to do this."
Yeah.
That's not everybody's gonna do that.
Yeah.
Right, and it's the same sort of principle. You're gonna figure things out. I admire how you're just saying, I'm going to figure it out some way or the other. I'm going to figure out how to do it, and I'm going to be successful at it. And it may look different than how somebody else does it.
Yeah,
but I'm going to do it.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the things I'm kind of surprised by, the creativity with which I've learned to do things. Because sometimes it's easy. Someone could do a task maybe in 5 minutes. It might take me 20, but I can still get it done. And so it's really interesting when people see me in action. They're like, oh, I would not have thought to do it that way. And there's some quip about like necessity being the mother of invention or whatever. And that's real for me. Like I have to learn how to figure this out. I want to keep living independently as long as possible. I like problem solving. So this is just a very ongoing project in creativity and problem solving.
I love that. I love that. What do you wish other people knew or understood more clearly about you?
Wow, that's difficult. I think for me, I've tried really hard to maintain as much normalcy as possible for how I live my life. I think there are definitely people who seem surprised when I tell them like what I've done in a weekend. So like over the summer, I wanted to get out and see museums and monuments, and that's what I did all day. And they're like, "Oh, you didn't go with anyone? How'd you get there?" And I'm like, "Well, we have a robust public transportation system, and Google Maps can get me wherever I need to go." And so for me, it's been really important to maintain as much of that as possible because it's really easy to just say, "Well, it's hard. I'm going to stay home." And that's not to say I don't have those moments where, if the weather is disgusting or depending on the circumstances, I might say, I'm not fighting that today. But really wanting to have a life where I get to enjoy the things that I genuinely like. I like being out to see the things that I enjoy, and it takes some problem solving, takes some, it looks differently than it would have looked 10, 15 years ago,
Sure.
but it doesn't mean it can't happen. So, you know, having a disability has made me very creative, very stubborn in a lot of ways. I think that comes with some faults at times, but you never know until you try. And so I think that's really, if this is going to be my normal and that normal will change over time, I want to be able to experience as much of it as I can.
Yeah. It just requires some advanced planning sometimes, right?
Lots of advanced
if
planning.
Friends want to go out for dinner, somebody's got to call and make sure that that restaurant is wheelchair accessible, right? That they can accommodate, a wheelchair like yours at the table, right? And that is there a wheelchair accessible restroom you can use, right?
Exactly.
I'm sure traveling is a bit more challenging, right? Whether you drive or fly or.
Yeah, I actually flew for the first time this summer with this wheelchair, and that was quite the experience.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of room to grow in the travel industry, especially flight.
Yes.
I made it, and I had, the benefit of really great staff at the different airports. But
and your wheelchair made it in one piece.
It did.
That's always the challenge.
It made it,
That's
and it
good.
did work.
That's good.
It was not without some casualties, but
that's what I hear most often.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, it was very much just when I get off of this plane, I need for my wheelchair to turn on. If it does that, I can figure out the rest. But I do think there's a lot of education, a lot of advanced planning that people don't always know about. And so any kind of travel, whether it's a plane, a train, car, whatever, it does take a lot more planning for me. So I would say that's actually a really significant source of anxiety for me, just because I can't just get up and go. I can't just get up and, if they break my wheelchair, I can't just get up and walk away.
Right. You can't just, when you're sitting on the plane, you can't just get up and use the restroom.
Also, so there's just a ton of planning. It's possible, but it's just that is something I wish I had really had an understanding of before. But like I said, I really enjoy, living in this area. There's a lot of different options for public transportation. I love campus has, some good options. Like I'm a fierce supporter of paratransit. I use that. I use it less now since I have this that has a pretty good range on campus, but for several years that was very much how I got around campus.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. And for those who aren't familiar, there is the American Air Carriers Act. I forget the whole name. The Accessibility Air Carriers Act. I forget exactly what it's called, but that puts regulations in place for air flights. And they're not, as you mentioned, there's still a lot more work that needs to be done in that area.
Yeah.
It's hard.
But it's possible.
It's possible. But I'm glad that things on campus are working okay for you. That's great. What have been some of your biggest challenges and how have you worked through them?
I think the biggest has honestly been mental for me. I view the changes because this is progressive, so it will continue to get worse, and I've kind of accepted that for myself. But the mental toll of accepting that, figuring out how do I live with this? How do I plan? How do I budget? How do I research what I need to be researching? You don't know what you don't know. How do you navigate relationships with people and as they're learning about it? And I would say like a pretty significant toll was just managing what it meant to kind of wake up one day able-bodied and then the next have to tell people like, this is not at all what my future is going to look like. And being young presenting as that's happening, I think a lot of people still see me and they're like, why are you in a wheelchair? And, especially when I was using a cane. So the mental piece is a lot. There's lots of frustration. Like I have good days and I have bad days where, I just want to be able to just literally hop out of bed and go run to the store and do X, Y, and Z. It just takes a lot more intention, which means things do happen a lot slower sometimes. I will say for me, like my mental health care team has been amazing. That was actually one of the first suggestions that I had after I was diagnosed. A supervisor said, you should probably look into therapy because this is going to be a lot in its long term. And that's been amazing. But I think, just the effort of kind of refiguring what I thought my life would look like. So my job provides me housing on campus, but with whatever comes next, and eventually I want to buy a home. So what does it mean to go from the kind of house that I always dreamed of having to being very practical about that, and then considering the cost. It's very expensive to have a disability.
I was just gonna say that a lot of times people don't realize the additional costs.
Absolutely. And so thinking about, what are the modifications that I might need? Do I want a home, like a house versus a condo? Because there's also maintenance, and I am not going to be out shoveling snow. So it can be overwhelming to think about what those stages will look like. What is, when I'm retired, and, what does it look like for living independently as this is going to continue progressing? So,
how has this been with your job as an RD?
I have to sing the praises of my department. I think that I've been very lucky. The supervisors that I've had at different stages have been really attentive to how this impacts me on a personal level, in addition to like physically. I've been really lucky. I started this position in an apartment that is pretty much ADA compliant. And so as this all evolved, I was like, oh, this is the best place I can be on campus. This is the best placement for me. And they've just been very attentive to how I do my work, being flexible with different things. I also have been very grateful for the Department of Residential Facilities, because at different times when my needs have changed, they've been able to kind of support that with things that I need in my apartment. And sometimes things that I didn't know I had access to. And so going back to, you don't know what you need, you don't necessarily know like what accommodations are an option. And so having people who are also thinking about the scope of your work, your quality of life, that's been really really helpful as I've navigated each different stage. So it's it's unique. There are unique challenges. Not every residence hall is wheelchair accessible, but there have been really supportive ways of allowing me to continue to do good work in my role, and navigate those challenges. So
that's great. So kudos to the Department of Resident Life. Yes. Right.
Yes.
Are there any final thoughts you want to share with us?
Wow. I think, one thing I learned along the way is that disability doesn't look one way, and what one person's needs may look very drastically different from others. And so take the time to learn more, take the time to talk to different people and understand their needs and why. That has helped me a lot in terms of stepping beyond like disability looking a certain way to me, and recognizing that other people I know with disabilities have very unique needs, even if things might feel or look similar, and just kind of getting out of the box of what we assume about people and their needs, and really just being open-minded. And let's look into universal design. That's please.
You want to share a little bit about what universal design is?
So I might not describe it well, but universal design is really about creating spaces that are fully accessible to people, and not looking at design as we need to accommodate this particular limitation or need. So creating stores that have automatic door openers, because everyone can benefit from that.
Everyone, use that example all the time.
Everyone can benefit from curb cuts and elevators and all of these things. So not necessarily looking at what is the problem we have to solve, but the problem we can prevent in the first place.
Well, how do we make it best for everyone in the first place, right? So we
absolutely.
don't have to reinvent the wheel, or we don't have to retrofit things, right?
Exactly.
As we all know, the power door buttons break all the time on this campus, right?
All the time. Please don't hit them.
I know.
Just tap them.
And one time I had somebody reach out to me and say, can we somehow just prevent people who don't have a disability from using them? And I'm like,
No, they can use, like there's value there.
There's value there, right? Like if I'm carrying, I don't have a disability, right? But if I'm carrying a bunch of stuff and my hands are full, sometimes they're at my knee level, and so sometimes I'll just use my knee and I'll tap there, right? So that's helpful, right?
Absolutely.
But as I use the same example that you just did, right? I say that if we have an overhead power sensor at the top, right?
Precisely.
That people are going to break, right? That benefits everybody. That opens the doors. That if I'm walking in with you, with a group of people, we don't have to do something separate. We don't have to go a separate way.
Exactly.
Route, right? If someone's pushing a stroller, if somebody's carrying a box of, books or whatever,
right.
It benefits all of us.
Yeah.
So the more we can do that to be equally effective for everybody, the better, right? And it's more inclusive.
Absolutely. And I've definitely seen positive changes over the last 10 years. Admittedly, before then, I didn't think about it. It wasn't a problem for me. I could get around. But now that I'm I see accessibility barriers everywhere in my day-to-day life. So I'm appreciative that the conversations are louder now and people who aren't necessarily directly impacted are considering what everyone needs. So yeah, there's some positive change there.
Yeah, that's great. And that's a great note to end on. So thank you so much, Karlena, for joining us
Thanks
today.
for having me.
Yeah, I do hope that this conversation opens people's eyes to what it is like to live with a disability. For more information about resources at UMD about disability, please go to our accessibility website at accessibility.umd.edu. And thanks everyone for listening.